So, Thales, I just want to go back uh, to this article that you had co-authored on Harvard Business Review Working Knowledge website, where you were talking about how Uber, Airbnb, and Etsy attracted their first 1,000 customers. Now, there is always a struggle in startups to acquire their first customers. Now, could you talk to us about the insights you uncovered when you looked at how these companies actually acquired their first 1,000 customers? And I have a follow up question to that. So, yeah.
Sure. So before that, every time I write an article, I write down what I think is the answer to the problem, right? And I talk to a lot of people, and they help me. What is the answer to the problem? So how does a tech startup acquire its first 1,000 customers? Well, before I went and visited and talked to these companies, my initial answer was, well, if you're a tech or digital startup, first you're going to acquire them online. Makes sense, right? You're an internet company. Why don't you use the internet to acquire? Why don't you use Google and Facebook and so on and so forth? And so I thought, that would be one way to acquire. The second idea was that, well, if you look at Uber and Airbnb and Flipkart and Etsy and Facebook, and they're just amazing products right from the start. They acquire customers because they were just amazing. They were great. They were so much better than the other ones. So I wrote these two things down. And in talking and seeing what these startups were doing in the early days, because there were a lot of articles about how they were doing now when they're already big, but I didn't see it. Like, I wanted to know the genesis when they were babies. How does the baby grow? How does the baby take their first steps? And in talking to them, first I realized that the vast majority of them did not use Facebook or Google to acquire customers. They tried, but it was too expensive, and it was like acquiring customer one by one. That wasn't going to make them grow fast. They couldn't take one step and another and another and another. They needed a few jumps. And they realized that the jumps that you get is by going offline, much more effective, and trying to convince people offline to use your product. And if you go one by one, it takes too long. So they would go offline to places where there are a lot of customers. Right. So in case of Uber, well, if you go to a street corner and try to get customers to use Uber for the first time, they're going to say, well, what? I'm not going to use this. Why would I? This is so risky. So they would need to go to places where there were more demand for taxis than there were actually taxis. So at the end of a concert or a sports event, there's tens of thousands of people coming out, and there's not tens of thousands of taxis. The first one gets the taxis, and then the other one have to wait or walk home or get a ride with a friend or something like that. And so they went there, and they kind of said, do you want to wait for the taxi? Yeah, but there's this new service, Uber. Download this app, try it out, and see if you like it. And they got a lot of customers, right? At the airport, they got a lot of customers because there was a line waiting for taxis. Airbnb, when there were certain big events or big conferences in the US, all the hotels were occupied. There was no place for people to stay. South by Southwest was a case. So they went there offline and started saying, hey, do you need a place to stay overnight? Try Airbnb. It's not great because we're just starting off, but hey, what are you going to do? Where are you going to sleep? And so they went and what I call number one, they acquire customers in bulk. They used other networks offline. They did it offline, and they acquired customers in bulk and went in bulk and got many customers at a time, right? Not using my original thought, which is acquiring customers online one by one. The other point that they did is, this idea that the service, it leads to this. If you don't have any alternative, you'll take whatever you can get. So in the early days, when you look and when I teach the class of Harvard or at the University of California, I show the websites of these businesses. They were awful. They were god awful. If you go and look Flipkart's original website, it was awful. Facebook was awful. The vast majority of these companies were so bad, yet they acquire customers, right? Why did they acquire customers? Because they had something that the others didn't, but they went where people were needing it. Again, Airbnb, there was no hotels available, so might as well try this thing out. And then people tried it, and then people started talking to each other about it. And so the word of mouth kicked in after a while, and it started growing the business. So when I teach my students, first, you don't need to build a brilliant new product, an amazing website. You just need to tap into a customer need that is being unmet, and try to do it when you find an instance in which the demand far outpaces the supply of it. The established companies get all of the customers, and there's still customers left, because then you're not fighting with an established company. Do it offline. You'll learn, to your point before, you'll learn about what customers want. You'll have a relationship. You understand how to pitch to them. You'll learn very quickly, and you acquire in bulk. I use the concept of other people's networks. Go tap into other people's networks. It could be a church, it could be a school, it could be the airport, it could be, the end of a big sports event or a concert. This is a network of people needing certain products or services, right? And then offer an experience that is good enough that will create the word of mouth cycle such that they'll tell their friends and friends of friends and so on and so forth. And that's how these companies acquire their first few thousand customers. And it's very different from what they do today. And that's very important. At every new stage of the startup, you need to change your customer acquisition strategy.